Imagine waking up one morning to discover that the very land you're standing on is sitting atop one of the largest untapped silver deposits in the world. Now, consider that the wealthiest investors globally have already uncovered this secret and are quietly channeling their capital into this resource, right here in Canada. While many people are still caught up in routine financial decisions, like whether to buy property or clear off credit card debt, a monumental shift in global wealth worth trillions of dollars is already unfolding behind the scenes. If you haven't heard about it yet, you might be falling behind. The focus of this financial shift is silver, and not in the way you might think. Historically, gold was the undisputed leader when it came to precious metals. It was viewed as a safe haven in uncertain times, a store of wealth hoarded by central banks, and a go-to for nervous investors seeking refuge during global instability. However, there's a new player in town. The shift has begun slowly at first, but it's accelerating rapidly. Silver has taken center stage, and its rising value goes far beyond what most mainstream financial outlets are willing to acknowledge. What makes silver in 2025 and beyond so radically different from the past is its newfound role. It's no longer just a store of value like it once was. Silver is now an essential industrial metal with an unprecedented demand. It is, quite literally, the backbone of the clean energy revolution we're witnessing today. Every solar panel being installed, every electric vehicle hitting the road, and even every piece of 5G infrastructure requires silver. This demand is not driven by speculation. It's a structural shift in the global economy. Silver has become a fundamental building block of the future, especially as governments worldwide are striving to reduce their carbon footprints and embrace new technologies. But there's a problem. The supply simply isn't keeping up. Over the past few years, the gap between global silver demand and supply has been widening at an alarming rate. In 2023 alone, the market saw one of the largest deficits in supply in recent history. Analysts who monitor this market closely predict that the rapidly increasing demand, spurred by industries such as green energy and technology, will create a shortage that could last for decades. When you hear projections like $30 trillion being tied to silver, understand that this is not some far-fetched fantasy. It's an estimate of the total demand expected over the next 2 to 3 decades, as the world transitions away from fossil fuels and towards a more sustainable future. In essence, silver is no longer just a precious metal. It's a key part of the infrastructure upon which the future will be built. And that's where Canada comes into play. Canada is not just a friendly, polite country with great health care and maple syrup. It's one of the richest nations in terms of natural resources. Canada is consistently ranked among the top 5 countries globally in terms of mining investment appeal. With world-class geological surveys, a transparent regulatory framework, and legal protections that encourage and safeguard investments, Canada has become an attractive destination for those seeking to tap into this lucrative silver boom. Notably, Canada sits on a treasure trove of silver reserves, with mining operations spread across provinces like British Columbia, Ontario, Quebec, and the Northwest Territories. When the world's biggest resource investors look at where they can safely access silver on a large scale, Canada is a top contender. But it's not just the silver reserves under the ground that attract investors. There's another critical factor at play: resource security. What that means is that Canada's stable political environment, coupled with its transparent business practices, makes it a reliable partner in an increasingly uncertain global market. As the demand for silver surges, wealthy investors are flocking to Canada, not just because of the silver itself, but because of the long-term security that the country offers in terms of both resources and investment stability. In summary, the demand for silver is exploding, driven by the shift towards clean energy and technological advancements. Silver has transitioned from being a mere store of value to becoming an indispensable part of global infrastructure. And Canada, with its abundant silver reserves and investor-friendly environment, is poised to play a pivotal role in this growing market for decades to come. The shift is happening right now, and those who recognize this early are set to reap substantial rewards. As global instability increases, whether through geopolitical tensions, climate shifts, or economic challenges, countries holding vast reserves of critical minerals are rising in strategic importance. Canada is one of those nations, and its role in the global supply chain is rapidly becoming more crucial. With growing demand for essential minerals, Canada has strategically partnered with key global players like the United States, the European Union, Japan, and others. These agreements, centered on sharing resources, elevate Canada as a preferred supplier of critical minerals, which are integral to maintaining supply chain security across the globe. When governments establish long-term agreements to secure a steady flow of vital resources, it sends a strong signal to investors. This is the place to be. The world's most astute investors have recognized this, and they're flocking to Canada. Let me paint a clearer picture of just how massive this trend has become. Over the past 3 years, institutional capital flowing into Canadian mining and resource sectors has surged exponentially. Major players, like asset managers from the United States, sovereign wealth funds from the Middle East, and private equity firms in Europe, are making significant moves to increase their stakes in Canadian silver and critical mineral assets. Many of these high-profile acquisitions and investments have flown under the radar, unnoticed by mainstream financial media. Why? Because when billions of dollars are being directed into a market, the last thing investors want is for media attention to drive up prices before their positions are fully established. The wealthiest individuals and institutions grow their wealth by operating quietly. By the time the general public catches on, the smart money is already securely invested. What's also noteworthy is the active role that the Canadian government is playing in this unfolding story. Ottawa has identified critical minerals as a central focus of its economic strategy. In fact, the government released a comprehensive mineral strategy, highlighting silver and more than 30 other materials as fundamental to both Canada's economic future and the global supply chain. To back this up, Canada has introduced tax incentives, funding programs, and a streamlined permitting process, all designed to attract mining investments at an unprecedented pace. This level of institutional backing creates a favorable environment for investment, a change that Canada hasn't seen in generations. When a government steps in with this kind of heavy institutional support, it significantly alters the risk equation for investors. The likelihood of regulatory changes decreases, while confidence in long-term returns rises. This, in turn, drives even more capital into the market. Now, let me be crystal clear, this is not about hyping up silver or selling a fantasy. At Canada Global Economics, our goal is to present the situation as it is, with clarity and accuracy. Silver, in its current state, is not a get-rich-quick opportunity. It's not some lottery ticket. The investors entering this market are making long-term, thesis-driven decisions based on the reality that the world needs silver, and the supply is limited. Canada, with its reliable access to these precious resources, is seen as one of the most stable places to secure them. These investors are thinking in decades, not days. It's this long-term focus, along with an unwavering discipline, that enables these investors to succeed, while others, driven by headlines, often end up losing money. The real question, however, is not whether silver is a big deal in Canada. It absolutely is. The data and the capital flows already make this clear. The question that matters more is what this means for ordinary Canadians, those who live, work, and invest in Canada. And more importantly, what does this mean for the Canadian economy over the next 10, 20, or even 30 years? This is the part of the story that affects you directly, and we're diving into it right now. The ripple effects of this silver boom on jobs, housing markets, mining communities, and even Canada's geopolitical standing are just as significant as the financial investment story itself. These changes are happening right now, whether the general public is paying attention or not. The full picture of how the silver boom will impact Canadian life will unfold over the coming decades, but it's clear that the future is being quietly constructed today in ways that will reshape the country's economy, workforce, and global influence in ways we're only beginning to understand. Let's start with the most immediate and personal impact of this economic shift: jobs. The Canadian mining sector already supports over 700,000 individuals, both directly and indirectly, across the country. But with new investments pouring into silver and critical minerals, a new wave of employment is emerging. Beyond the mines, there's an increased demand for engineers, environmental consultants, logistics experts, catering services, housing providers, and technology firms. The economic multiplier effect tied to large-scale mining projects is staggering. For every one job directly created, 3 to 5 additional positions are generated. This kind of expansion has the potential to transform entire communities and entire regions, and it's already happening. Over the last 18 months, several companies have announced major project expansions, while local governments are receiving numerous inquiries from exploration firms. The silver rush is no longer just an abstract concept for these areas, it's tangible. New contracts are being signed, new residents are arriving, and most importantly, there's a renewed sense of hope for the future. Now, let's take a step back and discuss the Canadian dollar, an aspect of this story that often doesn't get the attention it deserves. Canada operates as what economists refer to as a commodity currency nation. The value of the Canadian dollar is closely tied to the prices of commodities. As silver prices rise, mining revenues soar, exports increase, and the value of the Canadian dollar gets a boost. For Canadians, a stronger currency brings real, noticeable benefits. This connection, while often overlooked, is critical. The rising value of the Canadian dollar will help ease inflation, increase purchasing power, and potentially reduce the cost of imports, benefiting Canadians across the board. There's also a geopolitical element to this story. The world is currently caught in a critical minerals Cold War, with China dominating the processing and refining stages. In response, Western countries are scrambling to build alternative supply chains to avoid over-reliance on China. Canada plays a central role in this strategy. With its stable political environment, strong relationships with global allies, vast mineral wealth, and proximity to the U.S., Canada is considered a reliable and secure source of critical minerals. This position gives Canada genuine geopolitical leverage. The Canadian government has begun leveraging its mineral wealth in new trade agreements and supply chain partnerships, positioning the country for long-term economic success. When the European Union signs a partnership with Canada for critical minerals, it's more than just a business transaction. It's a strategic move. It's about securing a stable, long-term supply of essential resources. This kind of demand, based on structured agreements rather than fluctuating market prices, is incredibly valuable, and Canada has never enjoyed such a position before. Now, I want to speak directly to those of you who call Canada home. The silver boom is real, as is the investor interest and the growing government policy momentum. However, none of this guarantees that ordinary Canadians will automatically benefit. History has shown that resource booms don't always result in widespread prosperity. The key question is how Canada will capture and distribute the benefits of this silver boom. This question is fundamentally a policy issue, and it's one that Canadians need to engage with, loudly and publicly. At Canada Global Economics, we believe that these are the conversations that matter most. It's not just about the numbers, it's about the human story, the impact on communities, workers, and families. What kind of country does Canada want to be? That's what we're here to explore. So, where do we stand today? The $30 trillion silver story is not a fictional tale. It's grounded in real industrial demand, real supply constraints, and real capital inflows. The geopolitical forces at play are undeniable. Canada sits at the heart of this global shift in a way that's both rare and critically important. Whether you're an investor, a worker, a student, or simply someone who's curious about why the world's wealthiest individuals are suddenly so interested in Canadian soil, you now know more than most people. If this story sparked something in you, feel free to share your thoughts in the comments below. Let me know what you think about Canada's role in the global silver market. I'd love to hear your perspective on how this will shape the future. Also, if you think someone else could benefit from this information, don't hesitate to share it with them. It only takes a second and helps us reach more Canadians, providing them with the insights they need to navigate this evolving landscape. Thank you for tuning in.